the day I stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. Part 1. The Arrival. Had never liked humans. This was not personal hatred. They did not hate. They observed, they analyzed, and they reached logical conclusions. And the logical conclusion about humans was simple. They were dangerous primitives who had somehow stumbled into space travel before they were ready. They fought wars among themselves. They formed emotional bonds that clouded their judgment. They made decisions based on feelings rather than facts. The Galactic Council had spent 200 years watching humans spread across the stars, and they still could not decide if humanity was a gift or a threat. So they sent observers. Was one of them. Standing in the docking bay of the human vessel Steadfast Hope felt deeply uncomfortable. The ship smelled wrong. It smelled like sweat and recycled air and something the humans called coffee. It was loud with conversation and laughter and the clang of metal on metal. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible, incomprehensible chaos. A human female approached. She wore a white medical uniform with red symbols on it. Her black hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes held a strange weight that did not understand. "You must be our council observer," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. "I am Lieutenant Ship Medical Officer. Welcome aboard." Clicked their mandibles in the gesture of acknowledgement. I am here to document your mission and report human military behavior to the Council." Smiled, it was a strange expression. Humans showed their teeth when they were happy, which seemed backwards too. Showing teeth should mean aggression. "Document away," said. "Though I hope you find us boring. Boring means nobody is dying." She led through the ship. Everywhere, humans were preparing for something. They checked weapons. They loaded equipment. They ran diagnostics on machines did not recognize. But they also did things that made no sense. Two soldiers were throwing a small ball back and forth, laughing. Another was showing pictures on a screen to his companions. They gathered around and made sounds of appreciation. "What are they doing?" asked. "Private Menu is showing off his sister's baby," said. "Born last month. He has not met her yet." "Why is this relevant to the mission?" Looked at with that strange weight in her eyes again. "It is the most relevant thing of all." Did not understand. Added this to the growing list of things about humans that made no sense. The command center of the Steadfast Hope was a round room filled with screens and consoles and humans speaking in rapid technical language. At the center stood a man who was not tall, but somehow seemed to fill the entire space. He had gray in his short black hair and lines on his face that suggested many years and many difficult decisions. Captain Park introduced, "Our commanding officer." Turned to face. His eyes were calm and dark and revealed nothing. Had studied human expressions extensively in preparation for this assignment. His face was the hardest to read of any human had ever seen. "Observer," said, "the Council sent you to watch us save 40,000 refugees from being murdered by the Dominion. I hope you take good notes." "They are sending an extermination fleet," said. "My intelligence reports suggest you are severely outmatched. A logical species would retreat and save their own soldiers." Did not react to this. He simply said, "We are not logical." A large human male entered the command center. He had a scar running from his forehead to his jaw, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had faced death many times and found it unimpressive. "Captain," he said, "ground teams are ready. Equipment is loaded. If they want those refugees, they are going to have to walk through us to get them." "Sergeant," said too, "he leads our ground forces." Looked at with what the humans called a grin. It was unsettling. "So you are here to write about us. Make sure you spell my name right when you describe how handsome I am." His mandibles clicked in confusion. "I am here to provide objective analysis, not aesthetic assessment." Laughed, it was a loud, rough sound. "I like this one, can we keep them?" "The observer goes where the observer wishes," said. "That is the Council's agreement with us." Had intended to stay on the ship. It was safer there, but something in its tone suggested a challenge, and they, while logical, were not cowards. "I will accompany the ground forces," said. His grin grew wider. "Welcome to the team, bug friend. Try not to die." Over the next several hours, observed the humans preparing for combat. They cleaned their weapons with careful attention. They checked their armor piece by piece. They reviewed maps and plans and backup plans and backup plans for the backup plans. But they also did other things. They gathered in small groups and shared meals together. They told stories about their homes and their families. They made jokes that did not understand but that made the other humans laugh until they could not breathe. One young female soldier approached. She was small and slight, with short hair and bright eyes. She wore a medical symbol on her sleeve similar to his. "I am Corporal Shin," she said. "Combat medic. I heard you are coming down to the surface with us." "That is correct." Reached into her pack and pulled out a small, soft object. It appeared to be a stuffed animal, though could not identify what animal it was supposed to represent. "This is," said. "She has been with me since I was 5 years old. She comes on every mission." Stared at the object. "This is irrational. The object provides no tactical advantage." Smiled. "Is not about tactics. Reminds me who I am fighting for. Every child who still has a stuffed friend at home. Every kid who is scared of the dark. I fight so they can keep being kids." She walked away before could respond. Added this to the list. It was a very long list now. The announcement came 3 hours later. Captain's voice filled every room of the ship. "All personnel, this is the captain. Long-range sensors have detected the fleet. They are arriving earlier than expected, and there are more of them than we thought. Our intelligence said 100 ships. There are 300. Felt something cold move through their body. 300 ships. The steadfast hope had support from only 12 other vessels. The mathematics were simple. They would be destroyed. "We are not retreating," continued. "Those refugees are counting on us. We will hold the line until evacuation is complete. Every soldier knows what they signed up for. Today, we earn our pay." The announcement ended. Waited for the panic, the fear, the chaos. Instead, the humans simply returned to their preparations. Some of them prayed. Some of them wrote messages to loved ones. Some of them made more jokes. Sergeant walked past, checking his rifle. "You are not afraid?" asked. Considered the question. "I am terrified," he admitted, "but fear is just a feeling. What I do with it is a choice, and I choose to stand." Lieutenant joined them. "We have learned to carry our reasons with us," she said. "Every soldier here has someone or something they love. That love is heavier than fear. It has to be." Looked around the ship, at the humans laughing in the face of death, at the soldiers holding photographs and stuffed animals and writing letters they might never send. They were not ignorant of the danger. They knew they might die. They had simply decided that some things were worth dying for. Began to understand why the council could not decide what to think about humans. They were not logical. They were something else entirely. And, despite everything, wanted to see what that something else could do. The ship shuddered as it entered orbit around 9. Below them, 40,000 innocent beings waited for salvation. Above them, 300 warships prepared to bring death. The humans sang old songs as they loaded into the. They sang about home and love and soldiers who never came back. Their voices were rough and imperfect and beautiful. Had never liked humans. But standing among them now, preparing to descend into hell, felt something that had no word for. It would take a very long time before learned that humans called it hope. The day I stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. Part 2, The Landing. The shook so hard that thought it would tear apart. Outside, interceptors screamed through the sky, firing at anything that moved. The human pilots flew like they were insane, twisting and diving and somehow avoiding death by the smallest margins. Inside the soldiers sat strapped into their seats, weapons ready, faces calm. Was not calm, was experiencing what the humans called terror. "First time in combat, bug friend," Sergeant shouted over the noise. His mandibles clicked rapidly. This was a stress response. "They are observers. We do not engage in warfare." "Well, warfare is about to engage with you. Stay close to me when we land. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" Understood was beginning to question every decision that had led to this moment. The next to them exploded. Saw it through the small window. One moment it was there, carrying 30 human soldiers. The next moment it was fire and metal and falling pieces. Gone, just like that. "That was 7, someone said quietly. "Who was flying 7? Another voice asked. Silence fell over the cabin. Even with the chaos outside, that silence was heavy. Then spoke. "Was the best pilot in the fleet. If she went down fighting. We honor her by finishing the mission." The soldiers nodded. They gripped their weapons. Their faces grew harder. But saw something else too, in the corners of their eyes, in the way they breathed. They were mourning. They were already mourning even as they prepared to fight. Humans felt everything so deeply. It should have been a weakness. Somehow they made it into strength. They hit the ground hard. The doors flew open. Sergeant was the first one out, already shouting orders. The soldiers poured out after him, moving with practiced speed, fanning out to create a defensive circle. Stumbled out last, trying to make sense of the chaos. The city around them was destroyed. Buildings lay in broken pieces. Fires burned everywhere. The sky was dark with smoke and ships and death. Somewhere in the distance, explosions shook the ground. "Move, move, move," shouted. "Bunker entrance is 200 meters north, go." The soldiers ran with them, legs burning, hearts pounding. They were not built for running. They were built for thinking, for observing, for careful analysis. None of that mattered now. A missile hit the ground nearby. The explosion threw through the air. For a moment, everything was noise and heat and pain. Then hands grabbed and pulled them up. Corporal's face appeared, covered in dirt and determination. "You are okay," she shouted. "Keep moving." "Why did you come back for me?" managed to ask. Did not answer. She simply pushed forward and kept running. They reached the bunker entrance. It was a massive metal door built into a hillside, designed to withstand bombardment. Human soldiers had already secured the area and were guiding civilians inside. That was when saw them for the first time. They were tall, thin beings with 6 limbs and pale blue skin. Their eyes were large and filled with fear. They moved slowly, carefully, like creatures who had never known violence until now. Many of them were injured. Some were carried by others. And they were terrified of the humans. Understood this. They had heard stories about humanity, stories of wars and weapons and a species that had split the atom before they learned to feed their own hungry. To the humans were monsters. But the monsters were saving them. Lieutenant appeared from inside the bunker. Her uniform was already stained with blood that was not her own. She moved among them with gentle hands and soft words, treating wounds, offering comfort. "Bring the children first," she called out to the soldiers. "Elderly next. Anyone who can walk helps those who cannot." A human soldier nearby had a deep cut on his arm. It was bleeding heavily. "Lieutenant," he said, "I need medical attention." Looked at him, then at the wounded around her. "You can apply pressure to that wound yourself. These people cannot help themselves. We can." The soldier nodded. He did not argue. He tore a piece of cloth from his uniform and wrapped his own arm, then went back to helping into the bunker. Watch this exchange with growing confusion. "You prioritize alien lives over your own soldiers," said Tu. Did not stop working as she answered. "We came here to save them. What is the point if we only save ourselves?" But logic suggests that preserving your own fighting force would allow you to save more lives in the long term. Looked at, her eyes were tired but certain. There is a child over there who is missing her parents. She is alone and scared and does not understand what is happening. If I let her suffer while I fix a cut on a soldier who can wait, what does that make me? Had no answer. Turned back to her work. We are not here because it is logical. We are here because it is right. Sometimes those are not the same thing. Inside the bunker was even more chaotic. Thousands of filled the underground chambers, packed together in fear and confusion. Human soldiers moved among them, distributing water and food, carrying the wounded, separating those who needed immediate medical care. Sergeant was establishing a defensive perimeter. He placed soldiers at every entrance, set up weapons positions, created overlapping fields of fire. He did it all while talking, joking, keeping morale up. "Listen up," he shouted. "The ground forces are going to hit us hard. They outnumber us 15 to 1. That means each of you needs to kill at least 15 of them. I expect you to overachieve. Anyone who only kills 14 has to buy drinks for everyone else when we get home." The soldiers laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of people who knew they might die but refused to show fear. Private Minu approached. He was the quiet one who had shown pictures of his sister's baby. Up close, could see that his eyes were old despite his young face. "Sergeant," Minu said, "I request the forward position." Studied him. "The forward position will see the heaviest fighting, you know that." "Yes, Sergeant." "You got something to prove, Private." Minu's jaw tightened. "My parents were refugees once, from the old wars on Earth. Someone protected them when they could not protect themselves. I am here because of that. I will do the same for these people or I will die trying." Nodded slowly. "Forward position is yours, make every shot count." Minu walked away to take his position. Noticed he was carrying a small envelope in his pocket. Letters, perhaps, words he might never get to say in person. The first ground forces made planetfall an hour later. Watched through a camera feed as the enemy ships descended. They were ugly things, all sharp angles and dark metal. They hit the ground and opened up, and the soldiers poured out. They were humanoid but wrong. Their skin was gray and thick. Their eyes were red and empty. They moved in perfect coordination like a single organism with 1,000 bodies. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They existed only to conquer and destroy. There were so many of them. "Contact in 5 minutes," announced. "Remember your training. Remember your friends. Remember why you are here. We hold this bunker. We protect these people. That is all that matters." Corporal knelt beside in a protected alcove. She pulled out her stuffed animal and kissed it once before putting it back in her pack. "Are you afraid?" asked her. Smiled. It was sad and brave at the same time. "Yes, but fear is just a signal. It tells me something is important. These people are important, so I accept the fear and I do my job anyway." This seems irrational. Maybe, but if you only did things that made perfect sense, you would miss the most important moments of life. Love does not make sense. Sacrifice does not make sense. Being human does not make sense. And yet here we are. The first explosions shook the bunker entrance. They had arrived. His voice cut through the chaos. "Here they come, hold the line." Gunfire erupted, screaming. The sounds of violence that had only ever read about in reports. Now it was real. Now it was happening all around them. Pressed against the wall, overwhelmed, terrified, useless. But the humans did not run. They did not panic. They stood at their positions and they fought. They took wounds and kept fighting. They watched friends fall and kept fighting. Sergeant moved among them, a force of nature with a rifle. He was everywhere at once, shouting encouragement, filling gaps in the line, dragging wounded soldiers to safety while still returning fire. "Is that all you have?" he screamed at the enemy. My grandmother fights harder than this." Somewhere in the bunker, a child was crying. Corporal heard it. Without hesitation, she ran toward the sound, ignoring the battle, ignoring the danger. She found the child, a small blue thing no bigger than a human toddler, and she wrapped her arms around it. "It is okay," she whispered. "I have got you, I have got you." Watched her hold that child, while the world exploded around them. And finally began to understand. Humans were not chaotic. They were not primitive. They were not dangerous because of their weapons or their anger. They were dangerous because they cared. They cared so much that they would burn themselves to ash for strangers. They cared so much that they would face impossible odds rather than abandon the innocent. They were adaptable chaos given purpose. And their purpose, right now, was to protect 40,000 beings who could not protect themselves. Appeared at side, breathing hard, blood on his face from a cut above his eye. "You still alive, bug friend?" "Yes," said, "against all probability." Grinned. It was terrifying and wonderful. "Good. I was worried this would be boring." He returned to the fight. Began recording, not just observations anymore, not just analysis. Tributes to the humans who stood between darkness and light. To the monsters who turned out to be heroes. To the ones who would not let go. The day I stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. Part 3: The Sea. 72 hours. That was how long the humans held the bunker against the assault. 72 hours of continuous combat, of waves upon waves of gray-skinned monsters throwing themselves at the defensive lines. 72 hours of gunfire and explosions and screaming and death. Had never imagined such horror was possible. They had evolved beyond violence long ago. They had studied it, certainly, the way scientists studied diseases or natural disasters, but they had never experienced it. They had never felt the ground shake beneath them as weapons hit. They had never smelled the burning. They had never heard the sounds that beings made when they were dying. Heard those sounds now, and would never forget them. The humans fought in shifts, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, but noticed something strange. The soldiers who were supposed to be resting rarely slept. They gave their rest time to others. They checked on wounded comrades. They helped the refugees with food and water. They wrote letters. Always the letters. Private Menu sat in a corner during one of his rest periods, writing by the dim light of an emergency lamp. His hands were steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. Approached him carefully. "What are you writing?" Menu did not look up. "Letters to my family, my friends, my sister's baby, the one I have not met yet." "Will you send them?" "Probably not." He finished a line and started another. "But writing them helps me remember why I am here. Every word is a reason to keep fighting." "What if you do not survive to send them?" Menu finally looked at. His face was young, but his eyes were ancient. "Then someone will find them and deliver them for me. That is what we do. We carry each other's words home." He returned to his writing, left him alone. The second day was worse than the first. They had learned the defenders' tactics. They adapted, changed their approach, found weaknesses to exploit. 3 times they breached the outer perimeter. 3 times the humans pushed them back, but at terrible cost. Sergeant seemed to be everywhere at once. He moved through the battle like a force of nature, shouting orders, pulling wounded soldiers to safety, filling gaps in the line wherever they appeared. He had been hit twice already. He refused medical treatment until the fighting paused. "Sergeant," Lieutenant said during one brief calm, "you are losing blood. Let me treat you. Others are hurt worse. If you collapse, morale collapses with you." Considered this. Then he sat down and let her work on his wounds while he continued giving orders. "The commander sent another message," he told while stitched a cut on his arm. "Same as before. Surrender the aliens and we can leave." What was Captain's response? Grinned. It was the same terrifying, wonderful grin he always wore. He told them to come and take them if they could. Then he added some words I probably should not repeat. Why? Asked. Why not negotiate? Why not accept the offer? Your soldiers are dying. His grin faded. For a moment he looked tired, so very tired. Let me tell you a story, he said. When I was young, my grandfather told me about the old wars on Earth. Terrible things, millions of people killed. And during one of those wars there was a place called a concentration camp. Do you know what that is? Did not. It was a place where they put people they wanted to eliminate. Men, women, children. They worked them until they died or they killed them right away. Millions of people murdered because someone decided they were worth less than others. His voice grew quiet. My grandfather survived one of those camps. He was a child when they liberated him. He weighed less than a grown man's arm. He never forgot what he saw there, and he told me something that I have never forgotten. What did he tell you? He said that evil wins when good people decide that someone else's life is not worth protecting. He said that every life matters, every single one. The moment we start deciding who is worth saving and who is not, we become the monsters. Looked at the refugees huddled in the bunker. Frightened beings who had done nothing wrong, whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. They want to eliminate them because they are different, because they are weak, because they have something they want. Sound familiar? His mandibles clicked slowly. You see parallels with your own history. I see the same story repeating across the galaxy, and I refuse to be part of it. We all refuse. That is why we are here. That is why we fight. Finished her work and moved on to other patients. Stood up, wincing slightly, and returned to the battle. On the third day, they broke through. It happened at the eastern entrance. A concentrated assault that overwhelmed the defenders. Soldiers poured through the breach, heading straight for the civilian areas. Private Minu was stationed nearby. He saw what was happening. He could have retreated. He could have fallen back to the secondary line and regrouped with other soldiers. That would have been the tactical choice, the smart choice. Instead, he moved forward. Alone. Watched on the camera feeds as Minu positioned himself in a narrow corridor that they had to pass through to reach the civilians. He set up his heavy weapon, braced himself, and started firing. For 6 hours, Minu held that corridor by himself. They came in waves. He killed them in waves. His ammunition ran low, so he took weapons from fallen enemies. He was hit 3 times but kept fighting. He was bleeding from wounds he did not stop to treat. Reinforcements could not reach him. The fighting was too intense. All they could do was watch and listen to his communications. Still holding, he reported every hour. Still holding. When they finally broke through to relieve him, Minu was still standing. Barely. His legs were shaking. His face was pale. His uniform was more red than any other color. Is everyone out? Were his first words. Did the civilians make it? They made it, Sergeant told him. You saved them, all of them. Minu nodded once, then he collapsed. Lieutenant worked on him for 2 hours. When she finally stepped away, her hands were shaking. He will live, she said. Barely, but he will live. Approached Minu's unconscious form. The letters were still in his pocket, stained with blood now but intact. Why? Asked, though Minu could not hear. Why would you do this? You are one person, you could have died, you almost did die. Corporal appeared beside. She looked at Minu with something in her eyes that did not have a word for. Because that is who he is, she said quietly. That is who we all are. We cannot watch innocent people die when we have the power to stop it, even if it costs us everything. That is illogical. Maybe, smiled sadly, but logic never saved anyone from a fire. Logic never held a scared child in the dark. Logic never stood in a corridor for 6 hours so that strangers could escape. Sometimes love is the only logic that matters. The commander broadcast one more message that night. His voice was cold and inhuman, translated by the ship's computers into words that everyone could understand. You cannot win. We are endless. You are few. Surrender the aliens or we will destroy you all. Captain's response was broadcast to the entire bunker, to the soldiers, to the refugees, too. We do not trade lives, he said. His voice was calm and certain and utterly unbreakable. These people are under our protection. They will remain under our protection until the last one of us falls. And even then our ghosts will haunt you. So come if you dare. We are not leaving. The refugees heard this. They who had been so terrified of humans, who had believed all the terrible stories, listened to these words. And something changed. An elderly approached Lieutenant. It was the first time any of them had initiated contact with a human. Why, the old one asked, why do you fight for us? We are nothing to you. Looked at the elder with gentle eyes. You are not nothing. You are people. That is enough. That has always been enough. The elder stood there for a long moment. Then it reached out with one of its 6 limbs and touched his hand, a gesture of trust among a gesture they only offered to those they considered family. Did not pull away. Recorded this moment, not as an observer, not as an analyst. As a witness. A witness to something that should have been impossible. A bridge being built between species in the middle of hell. Understanding growing in the darkness. The humans were changing everything, not with weapons, not with force. With love. And they could not understand this. They never would. Somewhere above, on the steadfast hope, Captain looked at the tactical display. They were preparing something new, something worse. He did not tell his soldiers, not yet, they had enough to worry about. But he knew what was coming. The harvesters. And nothing would ever be the same. The day I stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. Part 4. The horror. The harvesters came at dawn on the 4th day. Had read about them in classified council reports. Biological weapons created by the Dominion. Living nightmares designed to break the will of any species that dared resist. No civilization had ever survived an encounter with them. Reading about them was one thing. Seeing them was something else entirely. They towered over the battlefield like mountains of flesh and metal. Each one was at least 30 meters tall, a twisted combination of organic tissue and mechanical parts. They had too many limbs, too many eyes, mouths in places where mouths should not be. They moved with terrible speed despite their size, and wherever they went, they consumed. That was their purpose, to consume, to take living beings and convert them into more soldiers for the army. Everything they touched became part of them. Watched through the bunker cameras as the first harvester reached the outer defensive line. 3 human soldiers stood in its path. They fired everything they had. Missiles, heavy weapons, nothing stopped it. The harvester reached down with one massive limb and grabbed a soldier. Saw the man's face. He was young. He was terrified. He screamed as the harvester pulled him toward one of its mouths. And then he was gone. His body locked up. Every survival instinct they possessed told them to run, to hide, to do anything except watch this horror unfold. They had evolved to avoid threats. They had never developed the ability to face them. But the humans did not run. They advanced. Sergeant led the charge, screaming words in an old language that did not understand. Later, would learn it was an ancient Korean War song, passed down through generations. The humans sang it as they ran toward death. It should have been suicide. It should have been pointless. But somehow, impossibly, they started hurting the harvester. They found its weak points, the joints where metal met flesh, the sensors that served as eyes, the feeding tubes that powered its regeneration. They coordinated their fire, concentrated their attacks, worked together like a single organism. The harvester fell. It was not dead. It could never truly die, but it was damaged enough to slow down, to buy time for the civilians to move deeper into the bunker. Then the second harvester arrived, and the third, and the fourth. "Fall back to the inner perimeter," commanded. "Protect the bunker entrance." The humans retreated in perfect order, maintaining fire as they moved, carrying their wounded, never breaking formation. They set up at the final defensive line, the entrance to the deepest bunker where 12,000 children and elderly refugees were hiding. This was it, the last stand. Found themselves moving forward without thinking. They did not know why. They only knew that they could not watch from safety while these humans died for strangers. Corporal saw approach. Her face was bloody, her uniform was torn, but her eyes were still bright. "You should stay in the back," she said. "No," replied. "I should be here. I do not know why, but I should be here." Smiled. It was the saddest, bravest smile had ever seen. "Then stay close to me." The harvesters attacked. What followed was the worst 2 hours of existence. The humans fought with everything they had. They used explosives, heavy weapons, close combat, anything that could slow the monsters down. They died by the dozens, consumed by the harvesters or crushed under massive limbs. But they did not break, they did not run. Lieutenant was hit by debris from an explosion. Her leg was shattered. She could not walk. 2 soldiers tried to carry her to safety. "No," she said, "put me by the wounded, I can still work." They propped her against a wall with medical supplies beside her. She kept operating on injured soldiers while her own blood pooled on the ground. Sergeant took more wounds than any human should have been able to survive. A claw raked across his chest. A falling piece of metal crushed his hand. He kept fighting. He kept singing the old war songs. "Is that all you have?" he screamed at the harvesters. "My grandmother was scarier than you." Asked Captain, who had come down from the ship to stand with his soldiers, how they could face this, how they could look at these horrors and not break. His face was calm, his eyes were not. "We break all the time," he admitted. "Every one of us is breaking right now. The fear, the grief, the hopelessness, we feel all of it." "Then how do you keep fighting?" Looked at the soldiers around him, at the men and women giving everything they had for strangers they would never know. "We break forward," he said. "That is the only direction we know." Then the worst moment came. A harvester broke through the line. It was smaller than the others but faster. It got past the defenders before anyone could stop it. And it headed straight for the children. Saw it happening. The creature moved toward a group of young ones who had gotten separated from the main shelter. They were small and helpless and screaming with terror. Corporal saw it too. She did not hesitate, she did not think, she simply moved. Watched her run toward the harvester with thermal charges strapped to her chest. She had taken them from the weapons cache. She had prepared for this moment. Screamed no. She did not stop. She reached the harvester just as it was about to grab the first child. She threw herself onto the creature, wrapping her arms around one of its feeding tubes. For one single moment, she looked back at the children, at the terrified little ones she was about to save. She smiled. "Run," she said. Then she detonated the charges. The explosion was blinding. The harvester's head was destroyed. Its body collapsed, twitching and dying. Was gone. Screamed, not a sound. Not anything they had ever made before. It was a raw, horrible noise of grief that came from somewhere deeper than logic or evolution. The children ran. They reached the shelter. They were safe. Because a human woman with a stuffed animal in her pack had decided that their lives were worth more than her own. Fell to their knees. The battle continued around them. The harvesters still attacked. The humans still fought. But for a moment, all could see was the place where had been. Her stuffed friend had thought it was irrational, now understood. She carried it to remember who she was fighting for. Every child who still had a stuffed friend at home, every kid who was scared of the dark. She had become the thing she was fighting for, a shield between innocence and darkness. Sergeant appeared beside. His face was covered in blood and tears. "She was the best of us," he said quietly. "They all are, every single one." Then he went back to fighting. The orbital fleet arrived 20 minutes later. Human reinforcements, dozens of ships that had pushed their engines beyond safe limits to arrive in time. They descended like angels of destruction, targeting the harvesters with weapons that actually worked. One by one, the monsters fell. But those 20 minutes cost more lives. More soldiers gave everything they had to hold the line. More humans broke forward into the darkness. When it was finally over, when the last harvester collapsed and the forces retreated, counted the cost. Of 600 human soldiers who had landed on 9, 127 remained. 473 had died. But not a single child was lost. Walked through the battlefield as the sun rose. The human dead lay everywhere. Most of them had fallen facing forward, their bodies positioned between the enemy and the people they protected. Even in death, they shielded others. Found the place where had made her sacrifice. There was nothing left of her except a small patch of scorched ground. But something glinted in the debris nearby. Reached down and picked it up. It was, somehow, the stuffed animal had survived, burned and torn but still recognizable. Held it carefully. "I understand now," whispered. "I finally understand." The humans were not monsters. They were miracles, and would spend the rest of their existence making sure the galaxy knew it. The day I stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. Part 5: The Dawn. The sun rose over 9 for the first time in 5 days without the sound of weapons. Stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching the light spread across the devastation. The ground was torn and burned. Buildings that had survived centuries lay in ruins. The bodies of soldiers were everywhere, twisted and broken. But the bunker still stood, and inside it 40,000 refugees were alive. Because of humans. The evacuation ships arrived throughout the morning. Massive transport vessels that descended through the smoke-filled sky to carry the refugees to safety. Human soldiers guided them to the ships with gentle hands and tired smiles. Watched a young human private carry an elderly who could not walk. The private was wounded. His arm was in a makeshift sling. His face was pale from blood loss, but he carried the old one as if they weighed nothing. "Thank you," the elderly said in broken human language. The private shook his head. "No thanks needed, just doing our job." Why did you come here? Why did you fight for us?" The private was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would never forget. "Because you needed help, and we were here. That is all the reason we ever need." Sergeant had survived. Found him in the medical tent, sitting on a cot while doctors worked on his wounds. He had lost both legs below the knee. The damage was too severe to save them. He would need prosthetics, months of recovery, a complete change of life. But he was laughing. A group of children surrounded him. He was teaching them a clapping game from Earth, something simple with hand motions and a silly song. The children did not understand the words, but they loved the game. Sergeant said. Looked up, his face was tired and lined with pain, but his eyes still held that impossible spark. "Bug friend, you survived." "So did you, barely." Looked down at what remained of his legs. I never liked running anyway, more of a sitting person really." "How can you joke about this?" Smile softened. "Because the alternative is crying, and these kids have seen enough tears. They deserve to see someone laughing." One of the children tugged at sleeve, wanting to continue the game. He turned back to them without hesitation. "Where was I? Oh yes. Pat, pat, clap, pat, pat, clap." Left him to his game, Lieutenant did not survive. Learned this from Captain, who delivered the news with a face carved from stone. She died on the operating table, he said, not from her wounds, from exhaustion. She refused to stop working on the injured. She saved 47 lives before her body gave out. Could she have been saved if she had rested? Probably. His voice was flat, controlled. But that was never who she was. She could not stop helping, not while anyone still needed her. Thought about the weight in her eyes, about the way she had prioritized alien lives over her own soldiers because they cannot help themselves. We can. She died as she lived, said. Yes, finally showed emotion, a crack in the stone. She died exactly as she lived. Private Minu would live. The doctors said he should not have survived. The damage was too extensive. The blood loss was too severe, but somehow, impossibly, he held on. Visited him in the hospital ship. He was unconscious, connected to machines that breathed for him and pumped blood through his veins. But his heart still beat. His brain still worked. The letters were on the table beside him. Someone had cleaned the blood off them. They were ready to be sent now. A nurse noticed looking at them. He wrote to everyone, she said. His parents, his sister, the baby he never met, his old teachers, friends from school, even his neighbors. What did he say to them? Different things to each one, but they all ended the same way. The nurse's eyes were wet. Tell them I love them. Tell them I was not afraid. Tell them I did something that mattered. Left the hospital ship with a heaviness that would not go away. Captain was the last one to leave the planet. Watched him walk the battlefield one final time. He stopped at each body, each human who had fallen. He spoke their names quietly. He touched their hands. This was not efficiency. This was not tactical necessity. This was love. When he finally reached the last fallen soldier, he knelt and stayed there for a long time. Did not interrupt. Eventually, stood and walked to the evacuation shuttle. His face was wet with tears, but his back was straight. All bodies recovered, he reported. No one left behind. Captain said, "Why did you count them yourself? You have officers for that." Looked at with eyes that had seen too much death, and somehow still believed in life. Because they were mine, he said simply. Every soldier who died here was mine. The least I can do is remember their faces. The least I can do is carry them home. Returned to the Galactic Council 3 weeks later. They gathered in the Great Chamber, representatives from 1,000 species, to hear the observers report on human military behavior. Had written the report carefully, every word chosen with precision, every observation and documented. It was the most important document had ever created. The Council expected analysis. They expected tactical assessments and strategic evaluations. They expected cold facts about human capabilities. They did not expect what gave them. Stood before the assembled representatives and spoke. You asked me to assess whether humans are dangerous. They are. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was what many council members had feared. But not because of their weapons, continued. Not because of their tactics or their technology or their numbers. They are dangerous because they care. The chamber fell silent. I watched humans burn themselves to ash for strangers they had never met. I watched them stand against horrors that break the minds of older, wiser species. I watched them die with smiles on their faces because they knew their deaths would save others. His voice grew stronger. They do not fight because they are unafraid. Every human I met was terrified. They fight because their fear is smaller than their love. They break all the time, but they break forward, always forward, into the darkness, into the fire, into whatever hell threatens those they have sworn to protect. Held up, the burned, torn, stuffed animal that had survived the blast that killed Corporal. This belonged to a human soldier named Shin. She carried it on every mission to remind herself who she was fighting for. Every child who still has a stuffed friend at home. Every kid who is scared of the dark. His mandibles clicked with emotion that were not supposed to feel. She threw herself onto a biological weapon with explosives strapped to her chest. She died so that children she had never met could live. Her last word was run. Her last expression was a smile. The council was completely silent now. You ask if humans are dangerous. I tell you this, do not make enemies of them, not because they will destroy you, though they might, but because you will have made enemies of the only species in the galaxy that would die to save you. Looked at each representative in turn. And if you are ever in darkness, if you are ever alone and afraid and facing horrors beyond imagination, pray that humans find you first, because they will stand with you. They will fight for you. They will give everything they have to bring you home. This report changed the Galactic Council's position on humanity. It was not immediate. Politics never moved quickly, but slowly, over months and years, the attitudes shifted. Humans were no longer seen as dangerous primitives. They were seen as something else. Protectors, guardians, friends, requested permanent reassignment to human space. The Council approved without hesitation. After all, was now the foremost expert on humanity in the entire species. When asked why, gave the same answer every time. I stood with them in hell. I will not abandon them now. Captain Park received a copy of his report. He read it in his quarters aboard the rebuilt Steadfast Hope. When he finished, he allowed himself one small smile. Then he returned to work. There were more refugees to save, more innocent beings who needed protection, more darkness to push back. That was what humans did. That was who they were. Sergeant learned to walk again with prosthetic legs. Within a year, he was back on active duty. He still told terrible jokes. He still sang the old war songs. When asked about his experience on 9, he always said the same thing. I learned that legs are optional, but a heart is mandatory. Private Menu woke up after 6 weeks in a coma. The first thing he asked about was the refugees. The second thing he asked for was his letters. He sent them all, every single one, and he wrote new letters to the families of soldiers who had not made it home. Somewhere on a distant planet, a child drew a picture. It showed humans standing tall with wings of light spreading from their backs. Angels, protectors, the beings who had descended from the sky to save them from monsters. The child did not know the names of the humans who had died for them, but the child remembered what they had done. And the child drew them with wings. Because that was what they were. Angels in armor. Heroes who fell so that others could rise. Humans. Kept. The burned, torn, stuffed animal sat on a shelf in his quarters, a reminder of a brave young woman who had given everything for strangers. Every morning looked at and remembered. The day they stood with humans and witnessed a horror no alien could withstand. But the humans had withstood it, not because they were stronger or smarter or better, but because they refused to let go. They refused to stop caring. And in that refusal, they became something more than any species had ever been before. They became hope. True and terrible and beautiful hope. The kind of hope that could survive anything. The kind of hope that could light the galaxy on fire. The kind of hope that was worth dying for. And worth living for. Forever.